Hi and welcome to another edition of Cadence Fishing TV. We're on the river today fishing the feeder. I'm using a method that's really interesting and hopefully it's something you can add to your arsenal to help you to catch a load more fish. Some of you may wonder why on a river that's shallow and clear like this, lots of small fish, I'm not fishing the float. But the truth of the matter is that I'm actually practicing for a national match on the River Trent later this year. And the basic thing is that if there's loads of fish to be caught, you don't just have to fish the float. It's a great training ground, this, for fishing the feeder and mastering this day's feeder, because at times it can drive you mad with the bites. So there's a rig that I'm using that does help you to connect with more bites, and hopefully with a bit more work and application and practice it'll come good on the day when it matters in August. So for those of you who've tried fishing the feeder for small fish like this, you'll know just how frustrating it can be trying to hit those very quick bites from dace and small roach. But I firmly believe that this rig with the power gun and the self-hooking properties is the answer to the problem. So let's talk about the rig in some detail and try to explain what makes it so much better than a standard feeder in the loop rig or a paternoster rig. I think there's a few factors at work here, but the most important thing is how direct it is. Vis-a-vis, you've got a twizzled loop from the back of the swivel to a figure of 8 knot, and the feeder slides on a small micro bead, and when the fish pulls over a matter of a couple of inches, it hits that knot and you get the aggressive plucks and dropbacks on the quiver tip. You've also got the added factor of the power gum, or should I say feeder gum, as this stuff is from Drennan, built into it, and that acts as a shock absorber, but also enables you, if you want, to fish with much finer hook lengths than you may have done with a conventional feeder in the loop rig. And I know that you can go down to 0.8 hook lengths and still confidently expect to land decent bonus chub if you've got the power gum built into it. So let's start with a hook, and rather than fishing with a very small hook because you're catching small fish, we go the opposite way, and I'm a big fan of the B512 from Kamasan, which is a red hook, but it's a wide gape hook. It's actually the red variation of the B511, and that's a hook that stood the test of time. It's sharp, it's strong, it keeps its point well, and is perfect for fishing with double maggot. So let me show you a tip about hooking maggots, because this little tip adds to the effectiveness of the rig. So first of all, you go through the thick end of the blunt end of the maggot with the point, and then roll the maggot round and up the shank like so. You can see that. Then get another red maggot but pointy end on, just nick it under the point of the maggot, and there, if you can see that, and without hooking myself, you've got the presentation. And I'm a big believer that the dace, when they pick the bait up, try to just crush everything in the throat teeth, and obviously having a maggot threaded on like this makes it very difficult for the dace to actually crush the maggot, so they hold on to it for that bit longer, which gives you the chance to see the bite and to hook the fish. And obviously by using a bigger hook, there's less chance of the maggot folding over the point or causing some form of impediment to cleanly hooking the fish and being able to wind it in without losing it. So that's a good tip. And now let's look at how we attach the hook length to the power gum. So basically, between the buffer bead and the hook length, there's about 6 inches of feeder gum. The top 2 inches are twizzled, and you twizzle it by putting it through the swivel and then twizzling the gum, rotating between your thumb and forefinger with both hands. So your right thumb and forefinger might rotate towards your body, your left thumb and forefinger might rotate away, and that twizzles the gum up. And then you finish it off with an overhand knot. You only need the one, and then you leave about 4 inches of power gum below the twizzle, and in the end of the power gum, just 5 simple overhand knots, wetted and pulled down, create this connection. And then all you do is get your hook length with a loop on the end and basically lasso it above that knot, pull the hook through the loop on the lasso and pull it down behind that, and believe you me, you won't lose that. You won't lose any hook lengths. That will stay there. It's rather like a pole elastic connection to a rig, if you see what I mean, when people lasso that. So that's that part of the rig. As I said, I use a Drennan buffer bead with a built-in swivel, and I've got 2 inches of twizzled 4-pound line here that the feeder runs on, And as you can see with the feeder boom, it's got a very small eye, and that just runs freely up and down the twizzle. When a dace takes a bait, it pulls and hits this knot at the back of this short loop, and that creates the bolt rig effect, the hooking effect. Now you may be wondering, what is the purpose of feeder gun within this feeder rig setup? But it's quite simple. As I touched on earlier, its forgiving properties and stretch enable you on a hard river or a clear river like today, here in winter, gin clear water and overnight -2 frost, fish not feeding brilliantly, but it means that you can scale down. So I mean, I'm on a 0.10 hook length there, but I could easily scale down to a 0.08 millimeter hook length and a smaller hook with single baits, and confidently expect to hook and land pretty much everything that I do hook. And that includes bonus fish. So on the Trent in summer, where the fish are educated, you may end up going down to an 0.8 bottom and a smaller hook just to eke out bites. But with the power gun as part of the setup, should you hook a bonus, you stand every chance of getting that bonus out and adding to your catch. For clarification on how we put this rig together, just take a look at this diagram. Obviously, when you're feeder fishing on a river, it's important that you think about the rod position, and a useful tool to have, if you can get one, is a adjustable feeder arm like this, which can adjust in two ways: the length of it, because it's got a adjustment knuckle here so you can lengthen it or shorten it, but also a tilt adjuster, and you can set it at the angle that suits you and the strength of the quiver tip in the rod. And then you can see those plucks. If I just do this and you can look at the tip, you know, because you've got it at an angle up in the air with a bow in the line, you can see when fish attack the bait and unbalance the feeder, and when it drops back, when you get a pull and it drops back like that, you want to pick up and the fish should be on. The rod I'm using today is the Cadence CR10 12-foot feeder number 2. It's teamed with a CR5 4000 reel loaded with 6-pound Daiwa sensor. The reason for the rod today that I've used is simply to match it to a short chuck. I'm only chucking about 25 turns. A 2-ounce carbon tip, which is more than enough to see the delicate plucks and drop backs from these small fish. And just the fact that the blank is slim, it's forgiving, it's got a good action, and it's perfect really for this sort of fishing for dace on a feeder. The ground bait I've used today is from the MPW angling stable. It's a mix that's called Magic All Round. It was actually designed by another MPW ambassador called Alan Lepatorel up in the northeast, and it's one that he really made up for the teas, for the dace up there and for the skimmers. And what I like about it is that you can see there's some nice particles in it of crushed hemp, coriander, but it's been mixed in such a way that it gives off a cloud on the bottom. And this is an important thing with dace, because another friend of mine, Rob Hewison, does a lot of underwater filming, and he's filmed dace, and it's quite obvious that the big dace like to feed on the bottom, and the key to a decent dace weight is to keep those better fish on the bottom where they tend to forage for food. And it really is a good mix. So for today I've mixed 3 pints of Magic All Round with 3 pints of brown crumb, and it gives you this nice mix that's got some content in it, but it's also sticky enough to plug the feeder. So I'm just scooping maggots into the feeder in the centre, and then just plugging them at each end with this, and it's worked perfectly well today. Right, so let's talk about feeders, and you can see I've brought a variety of different styles of block end and open end feeders with me today, and there's a place for all of them, I should say, in your fishing. It all depends on the day and how the fish are responding. But just going back to the feeders, if we can just talk through them, you've got the good old Kamasan Black Cap block end, which is a great little feeder for river fishing, especially for dace, chub and roach. I haven't been using that today particularly because we're using a ground bait approach. The next one, this one, is a relatively new design, and it's called a jailbreak feeder. It's made by Cresta, and it's got a solid top to it, and it's really good for this sort of fishing when you want to give the fish big quantities of loose feed like maggots, because you simply fill it up and just squeeze a cap of ground bait in the end. But that means you're giving them a big payload of particles, maggots or casters. So that's a great little feeder. I've used that today on and off just to get more bait into the peg. The next one we come to is a typical plastic cage. This is a Nisa, and I guess it's a pellet feeder, but again it works on the same principle as a jailbreak, but it's got bigger holes which allow a quicker release, so you can actually fill it with ground bait like that, just put a few maggots in the middle and then re-plug it at the other end, and by giving it a good hard squeeze down, if bites are not coming that quickly, you can go in with this and wait and let the ground bait slowly release and wait for a bite. So again, different approach. And really the other two are bread and butter open end ground bait feeders. One is an old Thamesley, as you can see here, and I've added an extra strip of lead, and I've written on the side the weight, which is 42 grams with that extra strip of lead. I've weighed that at home on my wife's cooking scales in the kitchen, and I've just referenced the weight. This one's still available. It's a Drennan open end feeder, but as you can see here, I've actually taped up the holes because it's the sort of feeder I'd use in deeper water when I want the contents to get down to the bottom before the ground bait breaks up. And by plugging the holes, you stop water ingress and stop the chain reaction of the ground bait breaking down just as quickly as it would if it was a conventional feeder as it comes from the factory with the holes in it. Another question commonly asked at rod shows when people are looking at these rods and when we're talking about feeder fishing is a very important aspect, and that is what strength of quiver tip should you choose to fit into the rod when you're feeder fishing. Well, obviously when rivers are very slow flowing and bream are the target, a very soft tip is always the one to go for. But when you're feeder fishing like this, the very fast plucky little bites off small fish, you're better erring on the side of a stiffer tip rather than a softer one, because you want to see the reaction. And if I just show you the tip, you know, I'm doing that myself, but that is what happens when a fish picks up the hook bait close to the feeder and dislodges the feeder and unbalances the rod so that the tip springs back. Now obviously if you've got too soft a tip, it just pulls right over like this, and then the fish feel the resistance as soon as you pick up the bait and let go. So you're better erring on the side of a slightly stiffer tip than you think, and if it's just too stiff altogether and you're getting smashed maggots but not seeing a bite, put slightly softer tip in. And that's why all the Cadence rods come with a range of different strengths of tip, you know, and with this rod particularly, the 12-foot feeder number 2, I think I'm correct in saying that you have a 2 ounce, an ounce and a half and an ounce tip, and they're the perfect tips for this particular blank. So today, for our session on the Ribble, I've chosen the 2 ounce Cadence carbon tip, which was perfect for showing the pulls and the drop backs, just the right strength. There's a bite, and we've got it. Just a little drop back on the tip then, and that's all you're looking for. Another cracking day and a lovely way to end what's been a very rewarding day on a bitterly cold day in winter, fishing the feeder and with this devastatingly effective drop back self-hooking rig. Well, there we go, more than 60 days in a few short hours on the Ribble today using the self-hooking feeder rig. I'm pleased with that. It's been a good workout, invaluable experience and practice. And let's hope that you can put some of those ideas to good use and enjoy your feeder fishing even more in the future. Thanks very much for watching.